The worst decisions in life do not always come with screams or sirens. Sometimes they arrive quietly on Christmas Eve, wrapped in fake smiles and corporate small talk, while snow taps the windows like it already knows what is about to happen. The man had worked there 12 years, 12 winters of early mornings, burnt coffee, missed birthdays, and loyalty that never once questioned the company logo stitched on his chest. The building stood in downtown Chicago, all glass and steel, glowing warm against the cold like it was promising safety. Inside it offered none. His name was Daniel Cross, mid-40s, sharp mind, calm presence, the kind of employee executives bragged about in meetings but never defended when it mattered. He believed in systems, in effort, in the idea that if you did good work, good things eventually followed. That belief was about to be stripped from him in under 5 minutes. The CEO office smelled like pine and expensive cologne. A small artificial Christmas tree sat in the corner, decorated with gold ornaments and zero warmth. The CEO, Evelyn Hart, sat behind her desk with that polished confidence that came from power and money working in harmony. She did not stand, she did not smile. By the time Daniel walked out, badge deactivated, box of desk items pressed against his chest, the city felt louder. Colder, like it was punishing him personally, fired, no warning, no severance, no explanation that made sense. Just vague talk of restructuring and performance concerns that did not match a single review he had ever received. What Evelyn Hart did not know was that this was not just an ending, it was a spark. Daniel's wife, Claire, waited for him at home with dinner ready and Christmas lights glowing. She noticed everything the second he stepped through the door, the way his shoulders sank, the way his eyes avoided hers, the way he did not remove his coat. When she learned what happened, she held him without words, like she understood the danger of what that moment had just planted inside him. The next year was brutal, savings drained, pride shattered, job interviews that went nowhere once recruiters heard where he came from. Hart Industries was powerful. People who left it did not always land on their feet. Some never landed at all. Claire got sick that spring. It started small, fatigue, missed steps, a headache that would not fade. By the time doctors took it seriously, the diagnosis was already written in stone: brain cancer, aggressive. Unforgiving, Daniel sold his car, sold furniture, took night shifts driving deliveries. He never complained. He promised Claire he would keep going no matter what. She died 2 weeks before Christmas, 1 year after he was fired. At her funeral, the snow fell heavier than it had the year before. Daniel stood alone long after everyone left. No tears, just a numbness so deep it felt permanent. Claire had believed in justice, in balance, in the idea that wrong things eventually came back around. Daniel did not believe in that anymore, but he believed in memory and patience. Years passed. Daniel disappeared from corporate circles. To most people, he failed, but behind the scenes he studied business law, corporate finance, mergers. Acquisitions, he learned how companies moved money, how they hid losses, how executives protected themselves with layers of deniability and paperwork. He took a job no one noticed, then another. He saved quietly, invested smarter, watched markets like a predator watches movement. Slowly, methodically, he built something new, a shell company, then another, names no one would ever connect back to him. Meanwhile, Hart Industries grew fast and ugly. Expansion overseas, aggressive acquisitions, whispers of labor violations. Accounting tricks, nothing that stuck. Evelyn Hart was untouchable. Magazine covers, awards, charity galas where she smiled like a savior. What the public did not see was the rot inside the company, the quiet settlements, the falsified reports. The shell vendors funneling money into private accounts, and buried deep in archived files, a set of documents marked internal only. A decision made on Christmas Eve years ago, a termination used to erase someone who knew too much. Daniel knew exactly where to look. By the time Hart Industries went public with its biggest expansion yet, Daniel owned stock through 6 different entities. Enough to matter, not enough to be seen. He attended no meetings, asked no questions, just listened. Then came the night everything cracked. A fire broke out in one of Hart Industries' overseas manufacturing facilities. 3 workers died. Investigators ruled it an accident within hours, faulty wiring, bad luck. The stock dipped and recovered by morning. Daniel did not sleep that night. He watched the coverage on mute. He knew the plant. He had seen the inspection reports years ago. He remembered the emails flagged but ignored. He remembered Evelyn Hart signing off on cost cuts that stripped safety protocols down to the bone. He also remembered the timestamp, Christmas Eve, the same day, the same pattern, problems erased instead of fixed. People removed instead of protected. Daniel made his first move. He contacted a journalist under a fake name. Provided documents, real ones, not leaks, not rumors, signed reports, emails with metadata intact. The journalist did not publish right away. They verified, cross-checked, asked for more. Daniel gave them everything. The story dropped 6 weeks later. Not explosive, not loud, just careful, detailed, impossible to dismiss. Hart Industries denied it. Lawyers issued statements. Evelyn Hart appeared on television calm and unbothered. Behind closed doors, the board panicked. An internal audit began. Then another. Regulators stepped in quietly. The company's expansion stalled. Investors grew nervous. Shares slid slowly, like a body bleeding out without anyone noticing. Daniel watched from a distance. Then the police got involved. What started as a safety investigation turned financial. Money trails surfaced. Shell vendors traced back to private accounts, bribes disguised as consulting fees, evidence stacked higher than denial could bury. Evelyn Hart claimed ignorance, claimed betrayal, claimed she had been misled by subordinates. The problem was one document she forgot about. A termination file, Christmas Eve, Daniel Cross. The memo referenced his objections to safety cuts. His refusal to approve falsified inspection results. His sudden removal for performance issues days later. That file changed everything. Authorities connected timelines, motives, patterns. It stopped being corporate negligence. It became intent. By the time police knocked on Evelyn Hart's door, Daniel was sitting alone in a small apartment, the same apartment he had moved into after Claire died. He held nothing but a glass of water and a framed photo of her smiling in the snow. The balance of power had shifted, and this time Christmas was coming for someone else. The knock on Evelyn Hart's door did not come with urgency, no pounding, no raised voices, just a calm, professional rhythm that carried authority without emotion. The kind of knock that did not ask for permission because it already had it. She opened the door in silk pajamas, hair perfectly styled even at dawn. She had always believed control was something you wore like armor. The detectives introduced themselves, stepped inside, and everything she had built began to fracture in real time. News broke softly at first, a short headline buried beneath politics and celebrity drama. Federal investigators question CEO in expanding corporate probe. Stocks dipped again. This time they did not recover. Inside Hart Industries, panic spread like a quiet infection. Emails stopped using names. Conversations ended when footsteps approached. Files vanished from shared drives. People who had sworn loyalty began calling lawyers. The company culture that once thrived on ambition now ran on fear. Daniel Cross watched it all unfold from a distance, the same way he had watched Claire fade day by day without being able to stop it. This time he was not powerless. He did not celebrate. He did not smile. He simply waited. Investigators traced the fire back to neglected maintenance. Maintenance requests ignored. Safety reports altered. They followed the chain upward until it led straight to executive approval. Evelyn Hart's signature appeared again and again, clean and confident, approving cuts that saved millions while risking lives. She denied everything. She claimed she trusted her team, claimed she never saw the reports in full, claimed the system failed her, but systems do not sign documents, people do. Then the journalist released the second piece. This one was personal. It detailed the firing of Daniel Cross years earlier, not as an isolated HR decision, but as a strategic removal. He had flagged violations, he had refused to comply, and he had been terminated days later under fabricated performance concerns. Public opinion shifted fast. This was no longer about accidents. It was about silencing. Police reopened internal records. They pulled archived emails thought deleted. They subpoenaed private servers, and buried inside one encrypted folder was the mistake Evelyn Hart never imagined anyone would find. A draft email she never sent. In it, she discussed Daniel Cross by name, referred to him as a liability, mentioned his stubborn ethics, suggested that removing him would clean up future complications. The timestamp read Christmas Eve. The same night Daniel lost everything, that email became the spine of the case. Evelyn Hart was arrested quietly. No cuffs for the cameras, no walk of shame, just a black car and tinted windows. She was released on bail hours later, but the image had already spread. The untouchable CEO now looked like a woman scrambling to stay afloat. Daniel expected to feel something then. Satisfaction, relief, closure. Instead, he felt tired. The investigation dragged on for months. Hearings, depositions, whistleblowers stepping forward, former executives trading information for immunity. Every revelation exposed another layer of rot. Then came the call. A legal firm representing minority shareholders requested a meeting. Daniel did not use his real name at first. He listened, he asked questions. He learned how much damage had been done and how desperate the board had become. They needed stability. They needed someone clean, someone who understood the company from the inside but carried no public baggage. They needed ownership consolidated under a trusted entity. Daniel made his move. Through a controlled acquisition, his shell companies absorbed enough shares to become the single largest voting bloc. The announcement stunned investors. Analysts scrambled to understand who had just taken control of Hart Industries. The name Daniel Cross surfaced publicly for the first time in years. Media dug into his past, the firing, the objections, Claire, the cancer, the timing. Public narrative flipped again. The man once erased by the company now stood as its most powerful figure. Evelyn Hart watched from her legal team's office as the news played silently on a mounted screen. Her face did not move. Her eyes did. She recognized his name instantly. Memories resurfaced, the meeting, the box in his arms. The way he never argued, never begged. She had dismissed him as weak. She understood now how wrong she had been. Daniel never contacted her, never issued statements, never framed this as revenge. He took over quietly, restructuring departments, opening internal investigations, cooperating fully with authorities. He did everything she had pretended to do. The trial began in fall. prosecutors laid out a story of greed disguised as leadership, of corners cut until people died, of truth buried until it burned through the floor. They played emails, displayed documents, connected decisions across years into a single pattern. Evelyn Hart's defense leaned on plausible deniability, on complexity, on the idea that no one person could control a corporation that size. Then Daniel testified. He spoke calmly, without anger, without drama. He described meetings, warnings, reports ignored, the pressure to sign off on falsified data. He described the moment he realized ethics were not valued, the moment he refused. He described being fired on Christmas Eve. The courtroom was silent. Prosecutors ended with the overseas fire. 3 workers, names read aloud. Families shown on screens, the cost of decisions made in boardrooms far away. The verdict came faster than anyone expected. Guilty, multiple counts, corporate manslaughter, fraud, obstruction, conspiracy. Evelyn Hart was sentenced to federal prison. As she was led away, she finally looked back. Her eyes met Daniel's for half a second. There was no hatred there, only disbelief, the realization that time had not healed anything. It had sharpened it. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Daniel did not answer. He walked past them all and stepped into the cold. Snow fell lightly. It reminded him of another Christmas, another ending. This one was not over yet. Prison has a way of shrinking people, not physically, but internally. It compresses time, confidence, and identity into something smaller and quieter. Evelyn Hart learned that quickly. The woman who once commanded boardrooms now stood in line for meals, her name reduced to an inmate number, her power replaced by routine. From the outside, justice looked complete. Headlines called it a landmark conviction. Commentators praised accountability. Hart Industries stabilized under new leadership. Profits recovered. Employees spoke of transparency like it was a brand new language. But closure is not the same as peace. Daniel Cross sat in his office late most nights. Same habit he had back when he was just another employee. Same view of the city lights, same silence. Power did not fill the space Claire had left. It only gave him more room to feel it. He had done everything right: clean audits, worker protections, compensation funds for the families lost in the fire. He personally approved safety upgrades across every facility. The company slowly transformed, not because it wanted to, but because it had been forced to remember the cost of forgetting people. Still, something kept pulling at him, a detail that never sat right. The fire investigation had uncovered negligence, fraud, and intent. But one question lingered in the margins. Why had the overseas plant been rushed into operation before safety clearance was complete? The timeline was aggressive even by Hart industry standards. It felt desperate. Daniel dug quietly. He reviewed old expansion proposals, followed internal memos, cross-referenced budget reallocations. And there it was, a financial cliff the company had been racing toward years earlier, a liquidity crisis hidden through creative accounting. The fire was not just a risk, it was a gamble to meet production deadlines that kept the illusion alive. But the deeper he went, the darker it got. There was another name buried in those files, one that never surfaced during trial. A private equity partner tied to offshore accounts, someone who had benefited massively from the cost cuts. Someone protected by distance and influence. Daniel realized something unsettling. Evelyn Hart had not acted alone. She had been the face, the shield, the fall. The real architect had vanished the moment she went down. Daniel had a choice: let the past stay buried, let the conviction stand as enough, or keep digging and risk destabilizing everything he had rebuilt. That night, he took out Claire's old notebook, the one she used during her treatments. Between medication schedules and half-written thoughts was a sentence she had underlined twice. Doing the right thing does not stop when it gets uncomfortable. He reopened the investigation. This time, he did not go to the media. He went straight to federal prosecutors, presented evidence, financial trails, emails that showed pressure applied from outside the company. Decisions steered, timelines manipulated. It took months, then a year. Quiet indictments followed. A private equity executive arrested at an airport. Another charged overseas, asset freezes, extraditions. The story resurfaced, not as a sequel, but as a deeper truth. Public reaction was colder this time. People were tired of the story. Justice fatigue set in. But for Daniel, this was the final promise kept. He visited Evelyn Hart once. No cameras, no lawyers. The prison visiting room was sterile and bright. She looked older, smaller. Time had stripped her down to what she was underneath the image. They did not speak. They did not need to. She knew why he was there, and he knew what she realized too late. She had believed sacrificing others would save herself. In the end, it only delayed the inevitable. As he stood to leave, she finally understood something that cut deeper than her sentence. Daniel had not destroyed her out of hatred. He had simply refused to let the truth die the way his wife had. Years later, Daniel stepped down from Hart Industries. He sold his shares quietly, donated a portion of the proceeds to worker safety organizations and cancer research. He left the city, no farewell, no interviews. The building still stood. The company still operated. But his name slowly faded from headlines. On Christmas Eve, years after everything began, Daniel visited a small cemetery outside the city. Snow fell gently. He brushed it off a headstone and sat beside it. Claire Cross. He spoke softly, not to the stone, but to the memory. It is done. The world moved on. It always does. But somewhere inside corporate offices and courtrooms, a quiet lesson remained. That erasing the wrong person can be the most expensive mistake of all. And that time, when paired with truth, always collects its debt.